And I had this dream of making a real motorized elevator, zooming models up and down, so if you want to see that madness, comment down below, although I'm sure that's probably too out there even for you guys. So I guess I actually have to make this now. Alright, let's go. Over the past month, we've gone on a grimdark journey deep into the towering and claustrophobic necropolis of Hive City Zorpazorp. We've seen the primary infrastructure of the arcology come together, explored the incredible potential for modularity with our improved citadel tile foundations, and today, we're adding the finishing touches to this first city block to not only make it insanely detailed, but also incredibly playable. And yes, I did say first city block. If you guys think this is the whole board, you clearly don't know me at all. As the king of stupidly massive made playable, it's time to learn y'all in modular madness. Our first lesson is called Why Did I Suggest This and How the F am I Going to Do It? And the simple answer? Well, I'm not. I'm gonna steal it. Rule number 47 of the Book of Zorp, always cheat where you can. And that often means cannibalizing the hard work of others. I found this hilarious little elevator toy on Wish and threw it together to have a little play with the functionality. It basically comprises of a motor that connects to an axle and switch, which will create a winch once you attach some string. We're gonna steal the functional components and piss off all of the structural elements, as we need our elevator to be much bigger. Of course. I decided I needed to make a new top level for my building to house all of the mechanical components, so I glued together 4 tiles which would become the roof, and then mounted the motor housing directly to the underside, ensuring that the axle and corresponding winch would be lined up in the dead center of the 2x1 elevator shaft. I then needed to mount the axle itself to get enough clearance to ensure a good mesh between the gear teeth. I grabbed these 2 small lids from my daughter's yogurts in the fridge and lined them up in the center of the tiles above the shaft. They look super cool, like big fans or thermal ducts, but unfortunately, the outer lip was reducing the space along the axle which I would need for the longer length of cabling, so I trimmed them down and sanded the base to get them the exact height and glued them in place. I screwed in the brackets and mounted the axle, and with a quick test, we've got a nice functioning assembly. Next, we need to complete the housing of our elevator, so I grabbed some more Sector Imperialis tiles for the first time using the Manufactorum themed walls to go alongside the Basilica components I salvaged from the upper story I had to demolish. I had to trim down the floor tiles so they would fit the tight square layout, and then it was time to mount the power supply. The battery bracket had screws in the back plate, so I picked the windowless catacomb style plate from the Basilica and screwed it on. I had dreams of mounting the switch down near the doorway as if they were the call buttons, but the PC board was just too large, so I decided to mount it to the roof. I drilled 4 holes for my cable access and then glued down the board with some super and hot glue. I then joined all the matching wires, stripping some sheath, winding them together, and gave the switch a test. Boom, would you look at that. To get it all neat, I sealed the joints with lecky tape and then glued down the leads in various places, but before we seal this up, we need to do the winch. But first, it's time for a bit of Bitsbox porn. Sorry mine aren't as nice as Bill's. And after a quick rummage, I found some parts for the lift itself. I cut up and combined 2 sanctum doors and 2 girders to make the base of our lift, and then had a play with all sorts of little brackets and pieces, but ended up deciding to just use 2 pieces of sprue. I trimmed them down to get rid of all the obvious telltale signs, and even though they don't have a lot of detail, they'll be so rarely seen, it's going to work well enough for us. I glued them down and joined the top with some more girders and made a crossbar with another piece of sprue, and then cut down 4 lamp fittings and drilled out the clamps to create 4 lovely cable mounting points. For cabling, I've opted for the old faithful fishing wire. It's not quite the right scale, but will help store efficiently in the winch, and it's never going to break under this load, even during a jam or getting minced through the gear teeth. I measured the length of cable required by dropping the elevator to the bottom floor and then tied a noose at the right height and glued it to the axle. Another mechanism test, and she's still working. That's good. Always test regularly with this sort of stuff, otherwise you get to the end and you'll have to rip it all apart to fix something. Speaking of which, the elevator is getting caught on the internal textures. Time to hack up more GW plastic. I started by trimming down the elevator itself to get rid of all of the protrusions on the exterior of the cage and beveling some edges, but it was still getting stuck, so I had to face facts and cut down the floor tile mounting lips on the top and bottom of every single wall tile inside the shaft. Alrightio, 2 hours and many hand cramps later, and we have a lovely, smooth, unribbed shaft. A quick test, and I then decided to try and trash all of my previous work. At least we know that the fishing wire is strong enough. So now we'll finish off the top level walls and make a nice wraparound balustrade, but before we jump ahead with priming, we need to make a covering for the switch. I found a nice plastic lid from my saw blade packet and cut it down to size so it would slot in nicely. Now, of course, when scratch building with all unfinished plastics, there is one golden rule.
Sandpaper?
I gave the entire surface a good work over, removing the smooth finish to give something for the glue and paint to adhere to, and then grabbed some more little bits and pieces, some vents and gribblies, and glued them down onto the surface. A few guitar wire power cables, and she's ready for magnetization. I drilled out a mount in the tiles for some magnets, and then on the inside of the lower plastic lip, I glued 2 corresponding magnets, locking them in once again with super and hot glue. While I've got the magnets out, I decided to magnetize the structure itself to the top of the tower using some nice 5mm wide magnets at about 6 contact points. We cannot afford to have this delicate mechanism knocked flying. Inspired by the finish on the vent cover, I went back to the lift cage and added some lights from the new Basilicanum set, as well as a small control panel from the Orc-Mech gun kit, and mounted it via some more guitar wire power cables, which just add so much more to the piece. As always, I took it outside and gave it a big old Zenithal prime, first with an all-over base coat of dark grey, and then a top-down spritz with light grey. I threw the whole structure together, and all seemed to be in order, but to fully test its potential, I think we need a real combat scenario.
Kill him! Attack!
Sir, those greenskins have us pinned down!
Boom!
Get back there and blast them down! But nothing can breach them! Take 'em! Get the flamer. The heavy flamer.